it is a lifestyle change. It's changing your habits, right? Like for good sometimes of
Yeah.
continuing to choose. Because I think that good old social programming is strong, and you have to stay in that awareness
Mhm.
of choosing. Because then as
Yeah.
soon as you forget, that's when those old habits creep back in. So it really is, and there's a self-discipline in that. I really find it's really,
Yes.
it's like hard but sacred. There's like this like honor to it of doing that for yourself and prioritizing yourself in that way. I don't know. Would you agree with that? And what have you seen in your
Yeah.
own going through this for yourself, like from
Yeah.
before pre-Olivia and post-Olivia
Yeah,
of,
totally. I
yeah.
mean, I was a firefighter that fell into every firefighter trap. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm a, unfortunately a creature of the job. I mean, I was drinking too much, ended up with a divorce. I mean, I can check all the statistical boxes of being a firefighter, you know?
uh
And then now I'm traveling the country teaching breathwork mindset training to public safety. And so, the biggest difference is that, and I have a kid at home, and so that's when things really start to get real now. Is like I've got an 18-month-old, and she's starting to like press our buttons because she's trying to figure out like what her boundaries are. And
hmm
that's where like it's really challenging but critically important to know like, okay, this is a time when I just need to take that breath, like, and respond to what she's doing rather than reacting to what she's doing. And
yeah.
that'll have an impact on her for the rest of her life. Uh, but unfortunately, most of us haven't been trained in these skills, and so we get off shift. Like I said, I just ran this 24-hour straight training with no sleep on this training. Looking at my biometrics, my readiness score got cut in half. My resting heart rate literally went up by about 75%. And it took 2 full days, 48 hours for my metrics to come back down into a regulated state after that training. And
hmm
that's somebody who knows how to regulate themselves.
yeah.
And so you think about folks that are running 24/48s or 48/96 schedules, so you're just compounding it. And so you're in a highly activated state. Your readiness scores, if you follow that stuff, would be broken. You're all in the garbage. Your resting heart rate is through the roof. And then all of a sudden, your 18-month-old kid throws her waffles on the ground, like the exact thing that you've been working with. Like, no, we are not throwing our food on the ground. And
Yeah.
it's very easy at that point, though, to be in a reactive state. And
hmm
so, unfortunately, our families at home usually get the brunt of us as firefighters being in that reactive state because those days off, we're at home to, I hate to say it, but to regulate so you can literally go back on shift and give the best version of yourself back to the firehouse.
hmm
And that sucks. And so, uh, yes, there is a sacred discipline to doing these practices real time because it's not meant to happen in the nice, comfortable chair while you're playing soft, quiet music.
hmm
I want you to be putting breath work and mindset practices in place when things are going sideways. And let's be honest, it starts at home. When
hmm
was on the floor, I use that just like as a joke because it literally just happened this this morning. You can feel that activation coming on. You're like, no, like stop.
hmm
Uh, and so one of the key pieces about yoga, especially the way we teach it, and I had a gentleman just a couple weeks ago say this. He's like, the way you're teaching this to us, it sounds like this is a martial art. He's like, I've practiced BJJ and ground fighting for many, many years, and you're teaching this like a martial art. And I said, with all due respect, you have to remember that yoga actually was one of the original martial arts. It was actually taught for the warriors 5,000 years ago and has been translated through. The fact that it's gotten all soft and misconceived about staying in yoga pants and Lululemon pants and pumpkin spice lattes and all that hippie, like I can't touch my toes bullshit is
hmm
wrong. Like it's a disciplined warrior practice at its core. And so that's how we approach it. And so use those words, and that's exactly right. Like there's deep discipline within a yoga practice.
hmm
In fact, if I may,
yes.
I tell people the hardest position, like the hardest posture that we will ever put you, and I say this in every class I teach,
hmm
is to stand still or sit still if you're a dispatcher, but stand still and breathe. Period. And by stand still, I mean still,
hmm
like not a finger moving,
hmm
not a finger moving. And you can imagine, Jess, you've been with public safety your whole life. Like, how often do you see anybody just like standing or sitting still? Like we, especially firefighters, like we get that. neuroplasticity of like, oh, we got to sway our hips so their past alarms don't go off and everything else. And so
Mhm.
get a group of firefighters to stand still and breathe, they can do it for about 3 to 5 seconds. But then you can start to
Mhm.
see the fidgeting happen, you start to see the movement happen. And
Mhm.
that's where it becomes mental discipline training because your
Mhm.
mind is starting to take over subconsciously. You don't even know you're moving
Yeah.
until you get real pissed at me because I'm pointing it out, like, hey, bro, why are you moving it back there? And you see them look at me like, what? I'm like, yeah, man, like, stop. Stand still and breathe. Like, let's just start to put our hands back on the steering wheel of our car and get back in control of it, AKA taking control of our mind through that discipline standpoint.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the same, I'm sure we struggle stopping thought for 3 to 5 seconds, and you really think about,
Really?
like, that in itself, the same practice. It's really interesting, that mirroring of body and mind of, like, just don't think for 3 to 5 seconds, like, how hard that is, and just that little mini, like, clearing. But
Yeah.
I love these stories because it sounds simple in theory, but the practice is like, again, it takes that discipline, and it
Yeah.
teaches you. You learn things that I think, about yourself and, the world around you, and, it's really insightful. Like, I think it's like the ultimate self-care of, like, really going deep inside yourself and finding where your own boundaries are mentally and
Yeah.
physically. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly it. So, like in our instructor school, like yoga, well, we also say that yoga is radical self study because it's exactly what you're diving into. Like it gives you that time and space. Like it's the mind's job is to wander. So like I don't want to beat people up for saying, okay, oh, my mind always is running and everything else. Okay, great. That's actually its job. So it's doing
mhm,
its job. However, if you don't have control over it and be able to put the brake pedal on, like if you get into that ruminative state where all of a sudden you're just thinking about the bad calls or you have so much anxiety of like running your drills tomorrow, because let's be honest, like all of a sudden we see like uh battalion burn building drills are coming up tomorrow. You've seen it. I've seen it. Guys start to either call out sick or all of a sudden they start to act a little bit weird because they've got this anxiety, quite frankly, of screwing up on the training ground in front of their brothers and sisters. Like that's where it comes from. So it's
mhm,
totally normal. But if you can't put the brake onto that thought, then your mind is controlling you at that point. And so that's where noticing and being aware, as you said, and having that radical self-study of what's going on here, that's really what it is. And so, to go back to some of the original text of the yoga practices, they actually say that the original intention of yoga is to stop the fluctuations of the mind. Like,
mm,
it
mhm,
doesn't say anything about stretching and touching your toes.
mhm,
It's 100% a mind game from literally the ancient texts that talk about why this thing even was originated in the first place.
mhm,
And so you're absolutely right that the body and the mind are actually 100% reflective of each other. So if you're fidgeting all the time, guess what? Your mind is also running probably out of control. And so if
mhm,
we can put the body into a still spot, then the mind starts to follow into that still spot. And so we end every one of our yoga classes with what we call neurological reset. So
mhm,
we're working on bringing the mind back into focus into that challenge response as we're moving the body with breath.
mhm,
And then at the very end of yoga class, I'll use this one phrase of Sanskrit, like you've not heard me use Sanskrit at all, which is the language of yoga.
mhm.
It's called Shavasana. So the only reason I use that one is because the vast majority of the world has heard the word Shavasana at some point because they've seen the shirts like I'm just here for Savasana, or they're like, I want to take a nap at the end of my yoga class.
Yep.
Like that's how people
Uh-huh.
have referred to it. And
Mhm,
so we've translated it to neurological reset, neuro reset for short. And so at the end of yoga class, after we've stirred up the body and tried
mhm,
to settle the mind, then we give folks a single point of object focus meditation. So
mhm.
we don't say, just lay there for 5 minutes and don't think about anything. Good luck, God bless. You're on your own. Like
Yeah.
that would not work. Like that would
Mhm,
not work. And so we have a lot of tools and a lot of techniques that we provide people that like allow them to learn to start putting uh grabbing the mind, stopping the mind, excuse me, as we call it, uh stopping that patterning of thought, or even letting the mind wander in some of our exercises and then catching it and bringing it back. And so with that at the end, we're kind of sprinkling in the broccoli into the brownies as our moms used to do once in a while, or at least they tried to do.
Uh-huh.
And get them to be doing meditation practices without folks even knowing they're doing that, but it gives them tools they can use in the rack room if they do get a few minutes where they can try to wind themselves back down quickly, or if they're at home and they can't get to sleep at home, they can grab that mind, stop it, gear it back down, and take control of it. So we end every class with those techniques, and then once the mind is geared down, we do say, okay, here, take 1 minute out of your entire day and see if you can find stillness of mind and stillness of body. Like that's how
Mhm,
I finish it off, because we've done a lot of the pre work. And so then all of a sudden you do hear that these guys are starting to be able to stop thinking for 1 minute, which is a big accomplishment.
mhm,
And then we also remind them, like, if you mind wanders, great, just re-engage the exercise. Who cares? It's its job to wander. And so
mhm,
people say they feel seen, they feel heard, because that's what's different, to bring it all the way back, different about us than the local yoga teacher. Like it's just everything is so like precisely measured out for this population.
mhm.
So
And it has to be. It has to be because I think that's really where, you know, how it's gonna get integrated into departments and then on a personal level, how people will engage with it.
yeah.
And I'm curious, you have mentioned in past interviews about
Yeah.
Flow by
Oh, oh yeah.
Mihai, Csikszentmihalyi. I had to
Nice
figure out
job
how.
with that name.
I
Nice
know.
job.
I had to write it down phonetically, but
Yes.
but
Which is just chick sent me high. So take that for what it is
I know.
too.
I was like, that's a great, yeah, that,
Right?
that makes totals. I'll totally remember that.
Totally.
Um, but why do you think like flow states are important for first responders?
Yeah, excellent question. So for those who don't know what a flow state is, it's a brain state where we perform our best and think our best. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is the kind of the grandfather of flow. He's out of the University of Chicago. Probably our modern day researcher on flow state is a gentleman named Stephen Kotler, and he wrote the book Rise of Superman, which is a fantastic book that really dives into the flow state if you're interested in it.
Mm,
Um, but the flow state is important for public safety, and we have all been there, whether we got ourselves there on accident or got ourselves there on purpose. And so think of that call, because that's the easiest to recollect, but think of the call where everything went right. Your crew just was like bing, bang, bang. You got off the rig together. You knew exactly who was going to do what when because you had worked together for long enough. Everything just snapped into place and you're just in this perfect concert. And then all of a sudden the time starts to slow down because you're just working in this perfect ideal state. Like that's the flow state. Uh, and so you've been there. Or another easy example of this, of being in flow that's not such high stress, is uh, you're sitting around a campfire with some of your best friends and you've been talking for what feels like 30 minutes, and then you look at the clock and it's like 4 hours later. Like that's a very easy example of having gotten into the flow state.
mhm,
Um, Flow states allow us to do some incredible things, quite frankly. And it's actually what the research shows, like, is that our prefrontal cortex actually goes slightly offline in the flow state, and not because the amygdala is taking over, but because the entire brain is actually starting to go offline a little bit, which allows our sense of self to get out of the way. Which is why we feel like we're one with our environment, we're one with the community that we're with, why we can do physical things that maybe we normally wouldn't be able to do, such as like the mom lifting the car off their toddlers. That's 100% flow state.
mhm.
Because if we have that sense of self online, it actually is a protective mechanism so that we don't break our own bones with our muscles. Fascinating stuff when you like start to dive into like how powerful the mind is once
Oh,
again.
yeah, yeah.
And so why it's why flow is important for public safety though, is because you will perform better under the flow state because of all of what we just talked about. Like,
Mhm,
unfortunately, it doesn't happen all the time, and what research shows is that if we don't have a way to recover after these things,
mhm,
it will take us a very long time to get back in the flow state, because it's a very challenging cycle for our brain because of the chemicals that are dropped. It's very taxing.
mhm,
So you need to be able to recover afterwards. And then it's literally the bond that ties us together. So this is what's fascinating too. So like when you're in the flow state, you're literally dropping the same chemicals of motherly love for their child. It's
Mhm,
why
mhm.
women can go through childbearing a lot. You can go through labor and then want to do it again. Like which still boggles my mind. But because of the chemicals the body drops in that state are so intense and so powerful from that love standpoint,
Mhm,
that they want to do it again. And so when we say that we love our brothers and sisters, like I'm sure there's some folks that have been through some traumatic stuff on the job and you hit that flow state and you're like, man, I love these guys. Like there's just like that true visceral love. And it's not by accident because you actually do love them because you're going through traumatic events and dropping the same hormones as falling in love, quite frankly.
mhm.
It's why our military personnel, you hear a lot of them say that they love their brothers and sisters and miss the combat, which to us civilians is like, how does that even make sense? How can you miss war? But that flow state drives us so powerfully into the present moment that nothing else matters.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so Csikszentmihalyi actually says that yoga and the flow state are very powerfully intertwined, if not one for the other, because we can use yoga to drive you into the current present moment, drop a lot of the same hormones. And so, what they've
mhm.
actually shown is by practicing yoga, mindfulness, meditation practices, it allows you to access the flow state easier. And so,
Cool.
and then it gets even deeper. Like another fascinating study from Mihai was that, which God rest his soul, he just passed away the last couple of years. But another fascinating study was that he did is he literally, man, it's fascinating, is that he figured out how many bits of information the brain could calculate, like literally how many megabits of information the brain could process in a given second.
Mhm,
And so what he found out is that people that have self-awareness practices, so this
mhm.
really comes down to meditation practices,
Yeah.
and yoga is a moving meditation, is that people that have a meditation practice actually can process a few more bits of information per second because of the self-awareness. It actually opens up that space a little bit in the brain to allow them to analyze information a little bit faster, which is critically important for us in public safety, where every single piece of information that we can take in and process could be life or death.
Mhm, mhm,
There's literal, again, line of duty death reports out there of missed radio traffic that leads to a fatality. And we all know that from auditory exclusion when we're running in the black zone or red zone, or just because there's so much information coming in, your brain cannot calculate it all.
mhm,
And so if we as public safety personnel can train our brain to process one or two, but it's bigger than that, bits of information per second more, then that one or two more bits of information may be the piece of information that could just save my life and or my citizen's life and or my crew's life. And so again, like learning about the flow state, learning about mindfulness training to increase the capacity of our brains, again, like come on, like like this stuff needs to be basic training. Like, come on.
Oh, hell yeah. I
So
completely agree. I mean, I think you've said this before, that self-regulation needs to be a standard in fire academies.
yes,
Like that it has
yeah,
to be, because and not only for the science of this, of, the usefulness of preventing, accidents and fatalities, but also I think there's a little bit in all of us of why we got into this job, because we were chasing that kind of mythical, heroic, those moments,
of
and
course,
that is how you reconnect with them, is by getting into like, you literally
yeah,
can feel it.
yes,
And I think when we lose that and we go into, yeah, these negative thought spirals, and our captain sucks, and we're just so fixated on the prickly parts, that we forget that these states of mind are restorative, and
yeah,
they're the human experience. That's what we're all
yeah,
chasing deep down, is this, like, the sweet meats of life,
yeah,
like,
and
and
yeah, and you're teasing something really, really critical about that is that what he also says is that if we're in states of chronic stress and stress activated states, the flow state is not going to happen. So if you're living in that state where like you get to the point where you're burned out or have compassion fatigue or have moral injury or have, God forbid, post traumatic stress, like you will not access the flow state. It's not going to happen. Like it is literally shut off. And so if you want to have those human experiences and feel that feeling of why you got into the job, you would damn well better figure out how to deal with your chronic stress state. Otherwise, you're not going to feel it anymore. And then that just perpetuates the cycle, unfortunately. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's an important thread to pull out a little bit more. So, yeah, that's a fantastic connection on
Mhm.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I nerd out on this stuff. It's just
Yeah.
like,
Right.
the hive. I It's funny in my, we do very similar things, Eric. I
Oh, we do.
focus mostly on the mental piece. Cuz and I call it adventure versus threat. So cuz
Yeah.
I love adventure and exploration, but yeah, it's just really juicy. The stuff is really, I think, if you can, move past any preconceived ideas you have about, a lot of these things, you find this really kind of adventureland in your own head
Right.
that was there from the beginning. And I heard someone say once that really it's our lives are imagination. Like, and when you start to think about like just what do we do with that, like how are we managing that imagination, and then how can we translate that into what our body's doing? So
Right.
it's really fun. And this is where I nerd out, as you can
Yeah.
tell. So,
No, I love it. And
but
it's so, and again, it needs, we'll stop, but it needs to be trained because you have to train it. Like you have to train it. And so while
mhm,
we're teaching this stuff out there, like for those folks that are listening and while you're on this platform, good for you, but you have to train it.
yeah,
Uh, and not to, if I may, I mean, I don't want to hijack the conversation too far, but if I may also talk real quick about like the breath work and why that's
yeah,
important from
please do.
a job performance standpoint. So we just,
Yeah.
because we're teasing good threads with flow and whatnot. And so when it comes down to breath work, this is something that's critically important for uh, firefighters specifically because y'all only have a limited amount of air on your backs. Like you
Hmm.
should want to know how to make that thing last as long as possible so you can, number one, have the most fun on the job. Let's be honest. If we're putting our packs on and going in and doing work, that's what we signed up for.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, right, like we didn't sign up for a lot of the other bullshit that we have to deal with. We signed, let's be real, people sign up to be firefighters to put their packs on and get in and go to work. Like that's originally why you signed up. That's the excitement. That's the flow piece we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And so there's a physiologist named Christian Bohr that talks about introduced the Bohr effect back in 1904. So this is
Hmm.
120. I like it. I like bringing it up this year because it's very easy to say that this is 120-year-old science at this point.
Wow.
But he right, but he pointed out or found out that um, in the human body, we actually have to have higher levels of carbon dioxide in our bloodstream to use oxygen more efficiently.
Hmm.
So, if we have low levels of carbon dioxide, you can breathe as much as you want to, but the oxygen literally is not going to separate from the hemoglobin and get into your cellular tissues where you need it. So, you can keep working. And so, that's kind of a misnomer for a lot of people. We often hear that carbon dioxide is that like waste gas that we just exhale and we don't need.
Hmm.
But for those that are paramedics, remember it's that CO2 drive, which is actually the drive that tells us to breathe again.
Hmm.
And so, what we need to do if we do this test, it's a very easy test to do for anybody that's sitting listening to this. You can run the test right now if you want to.
Hmm.
You just inhale, exhale, and then hold your breath for as long as possible.
Hmm.
Uh, not as long as possible until you feel that first urge to breathe. Like if you
Hmm.
hold your breath as long as possible, you're going to take a great big gasp in and be short of breath. That means you've held it too long. Okay.
Hmm.
So just inhale, exhale, hold until you feel like you need to take that first urge to breathe. Stop the stopwatch, and that's your score.
Hmm.
So we need, as public safety folks, we need to have that score, quite frankly, up into the mid 20s to the mid 30s. So mid
Hmm.
20 seconds to mid 30 seconds. But if I go into most day rooms across the country at this point, because of the profession we chose, we are in a sympathetic dominant state, which then therefore affects the way that we breathe. We have a lot of stress in our lives, which affects the way we breathe. We typically, hate to break it to you, but put on a few extra pounds because of the stress response, quite frankly, of the job. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult to breathe. And so you can see where I'm going with this.
Mhm.
We end up with dysfunctional breathing. And
Mhm.
when I run this test with firefighters across the country, average scores when we run this are anywhere between like 5 to 15 seconds,
Oh,
which,
wow. Mhm.
yeah, quite low. And so what that's measuring though by doing that test is how long it takes for the brain to get enough carbon dioxide in the blood system to make it want to breathe, right?
Mhm.
And so the longer you can hold your breath there without taking a breath shows that you have a higher CO2 tolerance.
Mhm.
And so with higher CO2 tolerance, you get more oxygen to your tissues. So you actually have to breathe less.
Mhm.
And that's where it all ties together, that all of a sudden the packs last longer in our back. Or not freezing our packs because we're over breathing, doing overhaul and things like that. We can actually train, again, proactively train to have higher levels of CO2 tolerance,
Mhm.
which is why breath work is critically important and why it's the only non negotiable of what we teach, so that you can have that higher CO2 tolerance, parasympathetic dominance breathing, and then those all go into play when you need it on the job. And so I had to digress for just one moment to
That's
talk
fine.
about the critical importance of learning about the Bohr effect and CO2 tolerance as a firefighter. Again, that is like, should be day one of academy so that your pack can last longer. Because God forbid you get in a shelter in place situation, you had better be trained to make that pack last. Otherwise,
Mhm.
the consequences are quite frankly dire. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
we have to be training on this stuff.
Oh, of course. Regularly, frequently.
Right. Yes. So
Yes, no, I'm sorry to glaze over that piece. There was just, so
I
much stuff
know.
about the mind that I nerd
I
out
know.
on. I'm
I know.
so
I know. And that's cool. That's where like the super unique modality and the fact that we work like both very, very closely together. It's like hand in glove between mindset and breath work. And so I
Of
wouldn't be
course.
doing my job if I didn't at least touch on that, especially as uh, a breathing nerd. Like I'm a mindset and breathing nerd at this point. So at some point, if somebody wants to reach out to me afterwards, like let's go.
Awesome. Because do you have another business with breathing that just focuses on breathing and breath work?
Yeah,
Did
we do. I also am a breathwork coach. So
Mhm.
I have a company called Breathe Tactically,
Mhm.
which is truly just that thread of breath work. And so,
Mhm.
because it's hard sometimes to get people to the yoga mat, like because of all of the misconceptions about what yoga is.
Mhm.
And so, at the end of the day, if we can just teach people how to breathe better, we get a lot of the effects from the yoga classes. But I will
Mhm.
say, quite frankly, the yoga classes are more effective because we layer in the physical postures so you can start to train the breath work under stress and that kind of stuff. But
Yeah, that's like a
yeah,
one, two,
kind of that
three
give and take.
punch
It
with
is.
your
It is.
protocols.
It
I
really,
love it.
really is. So
So,
yeah, so
yeah,
that's another company out there, Breathe Tactically. I won't lie, that one gets a little bit neglected sometimes because we're so focused on the mission at YFFR.
mhm.
But it is out there, yeah, for sure.
Mhm. Well, thank you for the services that you're doing for the population that we serve. And
Yeah,
as we kind of wrap things up, do you have something you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
yeah, absolutely.
Tell us
So
about it.
yeah, so we've talked a lot about breathwork and mindset training in this episode. So um, I believe you said we can put it in the show notes. So I'm going to make sure that y'all have access to our intro foundational breathing technique that we call it three-part breath. And there's some other techniques that are rolled into this. It's actually mostly audio, so you don't even have to have a video to play it. You just listen actually to Olivia coaching you through how to do three-part breath so that you can engage the parasympathetic nervous system. You can re-engage the diaphragm because, quite frankly, we didn't even talk about the diaphragm and the vagus nerve and those rabbit holes
Hmm.
and how they affect mindset
Hmm.
and how your brain is functioning. And so, but just know that those are a little extra piece in there. And then, obviously, it does have some mindset training. So, a very simple piece. You're going to listen to the audio, but really simply, you're going to. Here's the nugget. If you don't even go find the audio, I'm going to leave you with it right now because I would feel bad if I didn't even just teach you this right now.
Okay.
You're going to breathe into your nose,
Hmm.
down into your belly, and your exhale is going to be longer than the inhale.
Hmm.
Those are the ground rules.
Okay.
If you can't breathe in through your nose, work towards it. You, even with like deviated septums and everything else, you can get your nose back online. Turns out you just need to work at it.
Mhm,
So in through your nose, down into your belly, exhale longer than the inhale. And then you're going to say to yourself on your inhale, I am calm. And
mhm.
on the exhale, you'll say to yourself, I am in control. So it's 3 syllables and 5 syllables that should match the inhale and the exhale. And that honestly is it. Like if you just start to work on that breath technique and breathe, I am calm, I am in control, even if you don't feel calm, even if you don't feel in control because of the power of the mind, you will become calm and you will become in control within a round of about 3 to 5 of those breath cycles. So I'm going
Heck
to give you
yeah.
audio so you can get coached through it, but that is it. That is it. So you don't even have to go find the audio. That's the resource that I'm going to leave behind because that's the golden nugget of what we've got.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Your body is always listening. So, of course, yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Any closing thoughts, Eric, while we're still here? Anything
Yeah.
else you
No,
want to tell
sure.
us?
I mean, I could go on for days and hours, folks, and I appreciate you sticking with us this long. The important part and takeaway is give it a shot. Like just give it a shot. And you can go to yoga for first responders. Can say that. You can cut it out if I can't say that. There's free videos on our YouTube. There's free resources all over the place that we teach. So you can try what we've got to offer. Because again, I hate to break it to you, you're not that 1 out of 7 billion people. Like it will work for you if you choose
Hmm.
to engage with it. So
Hmm.
that would be my challenge to you today.
Awesome. I love it. Challenge accepted.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yes.
sharing your insights with us today, Eric. And as always, a big thank you to our community. If you're still watching us, good job. You made it all the way through today. And hopefully you got some good nuggets out of our conversation. And my door is always open to you. Reach out to me at info@firepowerx.com if you have any feedback, questions, want to find out more. But we'll drop all the resources that Eric mentioned below in our below the episode. And thanks for watching, and we will see you all next time.